Sarah and Larry are a well-known pure love couple in their circle, but Sarah never expected that one day she would discover her adopted sister is pregnant with Larry's child. Sylvia knelt before her, crying and begging her to bless her relationship with Larry. "Sister, please bless our family of 3. The entire Manfred family can be yours. All I have left is Larry and our child." Sarah quietly looked up at Larry. "Don't you have anything to say?" Larry's eyes were as dark as ink, and the hand holding the cigarette didn't even tremble. "You will always be Mrs. Lambert, and she only has this child in her lifetime. Why bother arguing with her?" Sarah knew he was determined to keep that child. She let out a light laugh. "Okay." Then she got up and walked straight back to the room, effortlessly found the divorce agreement tucked under their marriage certificate, and tossed it in front of Larry. "The child or the divorce agreement? Choose one." Larry burned his fingertip with the cigarette in his hand, then pressed the butt onto the divorce agreement. A charred hole instantly burned through the signature area. "I'll take her to have the abortion. In a few days, Assistant Bobby will deliver the abortion report to you." Sylvia suddenly opened her eyes wide, tears streaming down her face, looking pitifully at Larry while shaking her head repeatedly. "Larry, I don't want to. This is your child, due to be born in just a few months. How can you be so cruel?" Larry didn't even glance at her, waving for someone to come in and take her away. "Wait." Sarah suddenly spoke up, stopping Assistant Bobby's movement. "Send him to HA hospital. Report to me immediately about all the tests performed." Larry frowned slightly, then quickly returned to his usual expression. Assistant Bobby glanced at Larry and waited for his command. "Do it." Larry's voice betrayed no emotion. Only when Sylvia was taken into the car did the desolate crying fade away. Larry stood up and pulled her firmly into his embrace from behind. "Don't you trust me? Otherwise, you wouldn't have sent her to a hospital full of her informants for an abortion." Sarah looked at his face and let out an emotionless laugh. "How can you expect me to trust you?" Then she gave him a slap with the back of her hand. A crisp sound rang out. Larry grunted, his face turning to the side from the impact. He casually wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, pressed his tongue against his cheek, and then offered the other side of his face. "Have you calmed down yet? There's still the other half of the face." Sarah didn't speak, pulling out a tissue to wipe her hands. Larry firmly grabbed her hand. "My palms are all red. Next time, use a whip instead, so you don't hurt your own hands." Without another word, he pulled her back to the bedroom, intent on applying medicine to her wounds. Seeing the sickly obsession in the man's eyes, Sarah closed her eyes wearily. "Larry, let's get a divorce." The man's hand applying the medicine paused. "Don't say such things again. You know perfectly well I can't live without you in this lifetime. Unless I die, I won't let you go." Sarah opened her eyes again, her eyes bloodshot. He knew perfectly well that what she couldn't stand the most was betrayal. Growing up under strict discipline, she had only ever shown any tenderness towards her seemingly fragile adopted sister, but now even that was gone. "Do you love her?" Larry didn't hesitate for a moment and answered immediately. "Your body is too unwell to bear children, but now that I need to establish my position in the Lambert family, the only thing missing is a child. What's more important is that her child would look very much like you." Back then, Mr. Manfred took Sylvia in from the orphanage out of pity. Seeing how much she resembled Sarah, for Larry, Sylvia was the most suitable candidate to bear his child. Larry rubbed his temples, his voice tinged with weariness. "Get some rest. I'll come see you again tomorrow." Watching the man's retreating figure, Sarah lay on the bed and couldn't help but think of the past. Larry was the lost child of the Lambert family. At 7 years old, Larry was being hunted by enemies and ended up wandering alone. Until Sarah found him and took him home as her little bodyguard. When he turned 20, he was found and brought back by the Lambert family, and the two of them naturally got married. He said she had saved his life, and from then on, his life belonged to her, in life and in death. There is absolutely no such thing as divorce. The only way to get a divorce is through widowhood. It wasn't until the 5th year of their marriage that Sylvia suddenly came to her, claiming to be pregnant with Larry's child. It turned out that the marriage she thought was unbreakable had long been riddled with scars. Suddenly, the abrupt ringing of the phone interrupted Sarah's train of thought. It was a message from the secretary. Mr. Manfred, the date for the sea voyage blessing has been set. It's in 2 months. The Manfred family made their fortune early on through overseas trade and enshrined a small temple on an island. This later evolved into a family rule. Every 10 years, an unmarried woman must be sent to the island to pray for blessings. The Manfred family selected Sylvia to go and pray. Sarah squinted her eyes, straightened up, and lit a lady's cigarette for herself. She replied with 2 sentences, "Set off a month early, have people make preparations. I don't want to see her face again in a month, it's time to put it on the agenda." This has always been her style. If you're going to strike, do it early. She had to let Sylvia know that not just anyone's things could be touched. Sarah personally set the date for the sea voyage. Although she heard that Sylvia had cried herself unconscious upon learning the news, it didn't change the fact that it was an auspicious day. She dug out the protective talisman she had once used to pray for Larry's safety and, for the first time in a long while, made a trip to the suburban Peach Blossom Temple. Incense smoke curled through the temple. Sarah walked in, knelt before the Buddha statue, and piously bowed 3 times. Yet these 3 bows no longer had anything to do with Larry. Sarah, you've come to pray for the sea voyage." The abbot came out, revealing a benevolent and kindly smile. Sarah smiled without saying a word. She was indeed praying for Sylvia's sea voyage. Just praying that she would die a little faster. The temple has built a new furnace. Burning filthy things in it can ensure peace year after year. Sarah nodded. Suddenly, an autumn wind blew in, chilling everyone and making them shiver slightly. Sarah looked down at the Patek Philippe on her wrist, quietly watching the second hand jump to the 12 o'clock position. Time's up. Someone suddenly draped a black trench coat over her shoulders. "Mr. Manfred, the prenatal test results are here." She indifferently extended her hand, taking the report and flipping through it page by page. Estimated gestational age is approximately 12 weeks and 2 days, which meant that 3 months ago, on the night she returned home immediately after securing the major Berlin deal, her wonderful husband was still tangled up in bed with her dear sister. The remaining content, Sarah didn't read at all, and directly threw it into the furnace along with the protective talisman. "Why didn't you look into Sylvia's miscarriage?" The secretary was somewhat curious. "I heard that Sylvia became completely depressed after learning she was chosen for the overseas assignment, and was already prone to miscarriage. After Larry found out, he still forcibly sent someone to terminate her pregnancy. She even sent over the placenta." "Then did you meet her in person?" Sarah looked up, calmly watching the secretary's astonished expression. She knew Larry had never actually aborted the child. After years of marriage, they knew each other's pain points best, and also understood what kind of performance could deceive the other. If the child had really been aborted, the one bringing this up today should have been Larry, not her secretary. He would never miss any opportunity to claim credit, and naturally knew that he would be caught the moment he lied. Where is she now? Sarah tightened her windbreaker. Perhaps because her heart had grown cold too, she only felt that this day was colder than usual. At the villa in Larry's name in Shunlan Bay. That was Larry who specially spent $500 million to arrange a mansion exclusively for Sylvia. Send someone to keep watch. Take action as soon as she comes out. Coincidentally, the deity worshipped at sea dislikes young boys and girls the most, Sarah said in a faint voice, brushing off the ashes stuck to her clothes, and directly got into the car. When she returned home, she realized there was an additional guest in the living room. Larry sat on the sofa, legs crossed. Clearly in a bad mood, Sarah naturally sat down beside him and poured a glass of wine for each of them. "I need an explanation," Larry said with a tired voice. Sarah took a sip of vodka without saying a word. It wasn't because she was afraid, but because she had done so many things that she wasn't sure which one he was referring to. "I'll call off the surveillance, as long as you sign the divorce papers. Then I'd rather you personally take care of getting rid of the child." Larry lifted his gaze, staring intently at her face like a python that had already captured its prey. "After the child is gone, you changed the list of people going out to sea. Why can't you be more merciful? Why must you pick on a young girl and ruin such an important blessing ceremony?" Sarah suddenly felt a deep sorrow for her marriage. After 5 years of marriage, they now stood facing each other in court. Allowing her to keep the child until 3 months old is already the greatest mercy I can offer. Larry, his eyes dimmed, reached out to pull her into his embrace, but she pushed him away with one hand. Larry, that night 3 months ago, the presidential suite at the Hilton, 8 rooms, all of it makes me feel utterly disgusted. Sarah stood up, walked into the room without looking back, and slammed the door shut. With a bang, 2 worlds were separated. When Sarah finished washing up and came out, she saw that Sylvia had sent her 2 messages. One was a photo of her own barely noticeable pregnant belly, and one sentence, "Sis, let's meet tomorrow afternoon at the cafe near Lambert's house." Sarah suddenly laughed, a trace of contempt flashing in her ruthless eyes as she couldn't help muttering under her breath, "Larry, your taste is truly awful. If you'd found someone with brains, I might have thought more highly of you. But you had to go and find such a fool." Sarah was seeing for the first time someone daring enough to take the initiative to negotiate with her face to face. Perhaps she thought that being at the doorstep of the Lambert family, with Larry watching her back, everything would be just fine. So when Sylvia came alone and saw the crowd of black-suited bodyguards behind Sarah, her face instantly turned pale, but she didn't want to lose face in front of Sarah, so she could only force herself to remain calm. She even deliberately pulled open her collar, revealing the fresh red marks that deeply stung Sarah's eyes. "Sister, Larry cares deeply about this child, even if it means deceiving you to protect him. Since you can't have children yourself, why can't you allow others to have them? Why can't you just let us be? I am your only family left. You should think about me too." Sarah cast a faint glance over. Sylvia instinctively covered her stomach. "When you climbed into your brother-in-law's bed, why didn't you think about us being family?" Sarah waved her hand, and the secretary behind her pushed a document in front of Sylvia. When she clearly saw the terms on it, her eyes suddenly reddened, and she was so frightened that tears welled up. "No, I absolutely will not go to sea, even if you force me. Larry won't agree either. This will only make him despise you even more. Once you set foot on this island, it might be for 3 years. She only has these few years of youth left. And she absolutely cannot let them go to waste. Do it." Sarah gazed calmly at Sylvia's tears. The bodyguard behind her immediately stepped forward, pressed her hand down, and after dipping it in red ink, was about to press it onto the document. "No, you can't. Do you know who my boyfriend is? If you dare lay a hand on me, I'll have Mr. Larry cut off all your hands." Sylvia screamed in vain. She was no match for several burly men. She could only watch helplessly as her crimson fingerprint was pressed onto the pristine white document. "Sarah, you just want to kill me and my child, break up our family of 3. A vicious woman like you deserves a terrible death. Bitch." Sarah smiled. Indeed, many people call her that. Then she should let Sylvia see what real tactics are. Slap her face. Sarah gave the order, and the bodyguard standing beside Sylvia immediately began to strike from both sides. He delivered several hard slaps to her face. Sylvia instantly saw stars, her ears ringing with a loud buzz. You bitch," Sylvia cursed through gritted teeth, tears streaming uncontrollably down her face. Sarah lifted her coffee cup and took a delicate sip, but her voice was icy and piercing. During the preparation for the blessing ceremony, shedding tears is forbidden. It shows disrespect to the head of the family and is an act of defiance. That is the reason for your punishment. Whip her until she understands. I don't know how many slaps I received, but the empty coffee shop kept echoing with the heart-stopping sound of palm strikes. Later on, Sylvia was almost completely losing consciousness, no longer having the strength to even moan. Suddenly, the main door was kicked open with a forceful blow. Everyone except the calm Sarah turned their heads to look. It's Larry who has arrived, with bodyguards in black clearing the way. He walked in the center, dressed in a custom-made suit that accentuated his tall, straight figure and cold, stern eyes, exuding a powerful aura that kept strangers at bay. Only half of his face was hidden in the darkness, making it hard to see his expression. Seeing Sylvia with her face swollen like a pig's head, he frowned slightly. Larry, brother. Sylvia, her eyes, swollen to slits, lit up as if she had seen a savior. With a sudden burst of strength from who knows where, she abruptly shoved the bodyguard aside and tried to run toward Larry. As she passed by Sarah, She pretended to trip and fell straight down. My stomach, the cold floor pressed against her belly. Sylvia let out a scream, the pain so intense she nearly fainted. Blood began to gush continuously from her lower body. She immediately looked at Larry, sobbing uncontrollably, gasping for breath. "Larry, brother, you must save our child." She not only had someone slap me, but she also deliberately tripped me, trying to cause me to miscarry. Larry, ignoring the filth and blood staining his suit, he immediately scooped up Sylvia, yet his gaze remained fixed on Sarah. Sarah stood up and met his profound gaze. "You should apologize to Sylvia, for my sake. You shouldn't treat a child like this. Larry, I've held back until now to teach her a lesson, and that's only out of respect for you, otherwise." She would have made a move before Sylvia even finished her first sentence. Sarah sneered coldly. A fool who always thinks she can rise through her child should wake up and face reality. The atmosphere instantly dropped to freezing point. Bodyguards on both sides shifted slightly, their hands moving to their waists. Sarah raised her hand to signal restraint, revealing the deep scar on the back of her left hand between the thumb and index finger. That was from when Larry had just been brought back to the Lambert family and taken his position not long before. During his kidnapping, she'd thrown herself into danger to save him, and it left that mark. At that time, she had stubbornly taken a slash from the bandit, blood staining her clothes as it flowed down her pale wrist, yet she hadn't felt any pain. But now, because of Larry's words, she felt the wound starting to ache, all that Larry had gained over the years. Half of it came from her recklessly doing all the dirty work for him that couldn't see the light of day. It was not something a mere child could compare to. You knew how foolish she was, yet you still allowed her to provoke me. That's your fault. Larry's face showed no emotion, but his eyes darkened slightly. "She won't appear before you again." Larry turned and left without looking back. For a period after that, Sarah never saw Larry or Sylvia again. It's just that many collateral relatives applied to go to see. She brushed them all off using the documents Sylvia had already signed. After rejecting the 20th collateral relative, Sarah sent Larry a message: "As long as you get divorced, I'll replace Sylvia's position for the overseas trip." The other party's status showed typing, but in the end, nothing was replied. During this period, Sarah still went to the hospital regularly for checkups. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Yet after 5 years, there was still no child. Her lower abdomen had also taken a knife for Larry, and it would ache whenever it rained. Yet there was no specific medicine that could cure it. Sylvia mocked her, saying she had committed too many sins, her hands stained with too much blood, which was why children were unwilling to be reborn in her womb. Sarah felt that what she said made sense. That was why she didn't mind staining her hands with blood a few more times. As she was about to leave with the medicine, Sarah ran into Sylvia and Larry at the corner. "Larry, the doctor said that taking too much of this medicine can make a person unable to conceive without a sound. After you go back, add it to her food." "Okay." Larry remained silent for a moment. "There's no need for that." Sylvia suddenly felt her eyes well up with tears. "I'm just afraid that if she suddenly becomes able to have children, you'll definitely abandon me. I just wanted you to prove your loyalty. You know perfectly well that she has everything, while I only have you." Larry couldn't bear to see her tears. Gently wiping away her tears with his thumb, he lowered his head and kissed her soft, red lips. "Don't cry," a lingering kiss, filled with intense desire. It was Larry, an expression he hadn't shown her in a long time. Sarah watched the two of them entwined with an expressionless face, letting her nails dig into her palms. "I agree to all your demands. I've already thought of a plan for the sea voyage." Sylvia immediately revealed a sparkling gaze. "All women who go to sea for blessings must be veiled. I will arrange for someone to replace you on the ship when the time comes." Sylvia leapt into his arms with sudden joy. Larry held her tightly in his embrace, but when she couldn't see, he slightly turned his face and locked eyes with Sarah. Neither saw fear or surprise in the other's eyes. Sarah knew Larry's words were meant for Sylvia, and also for her. If he wanted to, he naturally had a way, but the candidate might be from the Manfred family's collateral line, or possibly, it could be her. But he didn't want to go that far. Sarah had just arrived home when, sure enough, Larry showed up right after. He skillfully tied on an apron, walked into the kitchen, and prepared 4 dishes and 1 soup, Sarah's favorites, when he brought the food into the room. Sarah was still reviewing documents. "Have something to eat. It's been a long time since you've had a meal I cooked." Sarah took off the gold-rimmed glasses perched on her nose and gave the food a casual glance. "I didn't add anything to it," Larry explained, as if trying to coax her. To prove it, he took a bite himself. "What I said at the hospital was just to comfort the little girl. She just had an abortion, and her emotions are unstable." Sarah smiled. "Are you blaming me? What if I said that child was deliberately aborted by her?" Larry didn't speak, but Sarah had already understood his meaning from his eyes. Perhaps because both had committed too many wrongs, they always remained guarded against each other deep down, so much so that now, even when telling the truth, they couldn't fully trust each other. Sarah was just about to take the meal when suddenly, the phone in Larry's pocket rang. The moment the call connected, Assistant Bobby's slightly panicked voice came through. "It's bad, Mr. Larry, MS. Sylvia has been kidnapped." The wind on the rooftop was howling loudly, but it still couldn't drown out Sylvia's hysterical sobbing. Sarah and Larry stood at the front and back respectively, both dressed in black trench coats, with a crowd of bodyguards packed densely behind them, filling the entire floor. A man with a scarred face gently traced a dagger back and forth across Sylvia's tender, pale cheek, frightening her so much that she couldn't help trembling. "Long time no see, Sarah." Scarface looked up, glaring viciously at Sarah, pointed at his blind left eye and let out a light chuckle. His voice was hoarse, filled with endless resentment. "I told you long ago, since you didn't finish me off back then. It's my turn to kill you now." Back in the day, Larry had just risen to power and was expanding his influence in the capital amid a storm of bloodshed. Almost everyone who opposed him was eliminated by Sarah. Only this scar-faced man survived. Back then, also on a rooftop, she blinded him in one eye, and he stabbed her in the abdomen. That single stab took away the only child she had with Larry. Sarah cast a casual glance at Larry beside her. His gaze remained fixed on Sylvia. The lighter's flame flickered in the darkness, igniting the cigarette between Sarah's lips. She exhaled a layer of white mist unhurriedly before speaking slowly. "Do you know why you lost to me back then? You shouldn't have threatened me with someone who shares no blood relation to me." Her voice was icy, tinged with faint mockery, sounding somewhat ethereal amidst the howling wind. "She may mean nothing to you, but for Larry, it's different, isn't it?" As Scarface's hand slowly moved downward, Sylvia instantly felt a chilling coldness creeping up her neck. "I've been asking around for a while and found out that Larry not only lives and eats with this woman, but also takes meticulous care of her. Sarah, you've worked your heart out for him for 5 years, and this is all you get." Sarah didn't respond, only slightly turned to look at Larry, a hint of sarcasm in her eyes. "Since she's your person, handle it yourself." Larry's face was half hidden in the darkness, his expression unclear. "Conditions, deal." The scar-faced man suddenly burst into laughter, his gaze at Sarah as venomous as poison. "I want her." His finger pointed at Sarah. "One of the 2 women must stay today, no matter who it was." Falling into his hands would definitely not end well. Everyone's gaze instantly fell upon Larry. Sarah turned away lightly, just about to leave when Larry reached out and grabbed her wrist. "Sarah." Sarah paused, knowing that Larry had already made his choice in his heart. He only called her that when he was asking her for something. Sylvia is the chosen one for the sea blessing ceremony, so she also has the obligation to save Sylvia. "The candidate can be changed, isn't that what you said?" Sarah shook off his hand. They looked at each other in the darkness. "Save her, and I'll sign the divorce papers." Sarah suddenly felt a pang in her heart. By the moonlight, she finally saw the emotion in his eyes clearly. There was no reluctance at all. She suddenly laughed, her face somewhat pale. "Okay." Sarah slowly walked up to Scarface. "I'll be your hostage in her place." Scarface sneered, casually picked up a nylon rope, and threw it on the ground. "Tie yourself up, then come over." Sarah did as she was told. By the time she reached Scarface, a hand was already gripping her neck tightly. The handle of the knife slammed into her forehead, tearing open a gushing wound. Sarah clenched her teeth and refused to make a sound. Blood blurred her vision. She saw Sylvia being pushed out, crying as she ran into Larry's arms. The man kept his head down, never once looking at her from start to finish. "You damn bitch. I told you I'd make you suffer once you fell into my hands." The scar-faced man grabbed her hair and yanked it back, forcing her to look up at him. With the other hand holding a knife, he cut through the layers of her clothing one by one. "Your husband doesn't seem to love you at all, even when you're suffering such humiliation. He hasn't even glanced at you." Watching Larry walk away, Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. "Looking at you this way, you do have some charm. As long as you're willing to follow me, I might just spare your life." Gazing at Sarah's fair, delicate skin at her chest, Scarface squinted his eyes lustfully. "Okay." Hearing her response, Scarface was momentarily stunned. Sarah instantly spun around and kicked him squarely on the wrist. He slammed against the wall, and the dagger flew out of his hand. Sarah wanted to step on the knife handle to flip the dagger up, but the scar-faced man, furious and humiliated, pushed her off the rooftop. A sudden sense of weightlessness washed over her. The wind whistled past her ears as she slowly closed her eyes. The next second, a sigh echoed in her ear, and she fell into a warm embrace mid-air. "Baby, just a little more. The sniper is almost in position. But don't worry, even if we go to hell, I'll be there with you." Sarah woke up to find herself lying in a hospital room. Fortunately, both of them had fallen onto the safety net, and because Larry was holding her tightly, she had barely sustained any injuries. Sarah got out of bed and walked into Larry's hospital room. "I want you to feed me." His forehead was wrapped in gauze, and he managed a pale smile. Sarah silently sat down beside him, picked up the thermos on the cabinet, and fed him sip by sip. "Why did you choose her back then?" A man who would rather die with her, yet didn't stand firmly by her side. Larry remained silent for a moment. "Sylvia is pregnant." Sarah suddenly felt very weary at heart. "The secretary will bring the signed divorce agreement later. This is what you promised me." Larry watched her get up and leave, his gaze fixed intently on her retreating figure, yet he didn't try to stop her. Sarah, after returning home, Assistant Bobby soon delivered a pile of jewelry. "All of them are Larry's treasures purchased from abroad. Where is the divorce agreement?" Sarah slightly frowned. As the voice faded, a tall figure walked in. Larry naturally walked to her side, reaching from behind to encircle her. "Do you like what I gave you?" Sarah let out a light laugh. "You know what I want most." Larry acted as if he hadn't heard, reaching out to pick up the Sri Lankan sapphire necklace from the tray and personally fastening it around her neck. "It was worth having someone specially wait in London to bid for it. It truly suits you." Sarah stared into his eyes, where the familiar tenderness had returned to those peach blossom-like orbs. She finally understood why there hadn't been a trace of reluctance in his gaze back then, because he never intended to let go. Sarah, her face turned cold. "Are you planning to hide her until she gives birth? If you withdraw the people from the ship, I'll let her set sail." Both of them knew exactly what the other's next move would be. "She can give birth on the island, and you've completed your mission. Isn't this the best outcome?" Sarah flashed a hint of mockery in her eyes. "Larry, do you remember what you promised me at our wedding, in front of hundreds of our brothers? You promised there would only ever be you." Larry took her hand and kissed the back of it, just as he had done years ago. As a gesture of submission. "Why doesn't it count now?" Larry looked up and let out a soft chuckle. "Baby, you can't keep living in the past." Sarah gave him a deep look, withdrew her hand, and turned to leave. "All promises only count when you're deeply in love." Later, Sarah didn't see Sylvia, but she didn't change her choice either. Once the person for prayer is chosen, they bear a heavy responsibility. If the contract is breached, A will be issued by the Manfred family and other collateral branches. Larry would not let Sylvia fall into such a dangerous situation. With 3 days left until the sea voyage, Sarah held a family banquet for Sylvia. Everyone had arrived, except for Sylvia, who was. The secretary stood by the main seat, frowning as she watched Sarah calmly drinking her tea. "Head of the family, should we go and invite Mr. Larry?" The reason everyone sat here so obediently waiting wasn't out of respect for Sylvia, but for the man behind her. "Larry, it's fine. Hunting always requires patience. Have you arranged everything I asked you to prepare last time?" The secretary nodded. Half an hour after the banquet began, the two finally arrived. Sylvia was dressed in luxurious haute couture, her expression haughty, with a faint, mocking smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I've been pregnant recently and can't help but vomit, that's why I was delayed on the road. Sister probably won't hold it against me, right?" Sarah looked at Larry. "After all, you are sisters, don't take it to heart with her," a light, airy tone. It would make her seem unreasonable and lacking in social grace if she continued to press the matter. Sarah nodded. "Take your seats." Sylvia ostentatiously linked arms with Larry and found a seat. Sarah showed no reaction, only giving her a meaningful glance. "These spicy dishes aren't suitable for pregnant women. Please bring my sister something lighter." "No need," Sylvia immediately declined. "Larry knows I can't get used to outside food, so he specifically had the family chef prepare this and send it over." Sylvia had barely finished speaking when Larry's personal chef came forward to serve her the dishes himself. Everyone present instantly changed their expressions. Sarah, however, showed no reaction. The meal was quickly finished. An elder from the Manfred family stood up and said he needed to discuss a collaborative project with Larry, thus sending him away, but the bodyguards he brought remained in place. Sarah had someone remove Larry's used dinner plate. The people at the scene quickly left, leaving only her and Sylvia. They sat as if at opposite ends of a negotiation table, with dozens of people standing behind each of them. "Sarah, your scheme has failed. You thought you could force me to leave the country and abandon Larry, but I'm pregnant again now, with him here. There's nothing you can do to me." Sylvia's voice was full of smug satisfaction. Sarah's slender, well-defined fingers tapped lightly on the rosewood desktop. "Twice now." Sarah narrowed her eyes slightly. "Didn't last time teach you enough of a lesson?" Sarah snapped her fingers, and the door slammed shut with a resounding boom. She drew the dagger from her waist and slowly approached Sylvia. What are you doing? I told you not to come any closer. I still have bodyguards behind me." Sarah let out a snort. Sylvia gradually turned pale, shrinking back involuntarily, but when she turned around, the bodyguards behind her remained unmoved. "You bunch of useless fools. Why aren't you stepping forward to protect me? It seems you still haven't figured out who is Larry's lawfully wedded wife." Sarah raised her hand and thrust downward forcefully. Sylvia let out a sharp scream. The sharp tip of the knife plunged deep into the gap between her fingers. Sarah reached out and tightly gripped Sylvia's jaw, forcing her to look up at her. "I've suddenly changed my mind. I'll spare both your life and the child in your womb. But you still have to pay a price for your arrogance." As soon as the words fell, a strange man suddenly emerged from the crowd behind Sarah. Seeing Sylvia instantly widen her eyes in terror, her lips trembling with fear, Sarah knew she had guessed correctly. "One more minute, and Larry will return to the banquet hall. Hurry up and confess. Pray that he will be as merciful as the Heavenly Father and forgive your sins." The moment the door opened, Sylvia gritted her teeth and directly pulled out a dagger, plunging it deep into her own shoulder. Blood trickled down Sylvia's shoulder blade. Suddenly, there was another loud noise. A finely crafted blade instantly pierced through Sarah's left palm. It was so fast that not a drop of blood was seen. Sarah frowned slightly, the color draining from her face inch by inch. She forced a mocking smile, staring fixedly at Larry who had struck her. Destroying her left hand was Larry's pledge of loyalty to Sylvia. What made it even more laughable was that the knife he used to stab her was the very one she had personally sharpened and given him as his 18th birthday gift. Larry looked gloomy as he held the pale Sylvia in his arms. "I could indulge your desire to vent, so I deliberately sent myself away, but you shouldn't have gone this far." From the angle he entered, if Sylvia hadn't turned her body, that dagger would have accurately pierced her heart. Sarah nimbly pulled out the knife, took the bandage from the secretary, and casually wrapped the wound. She didn't make a sound from start to finish. Larry gave her a deep look, then turned and left, carrying Sylvia in his arms. "Larry, you'll regret this." Sarah's voice was very faint, very faint. His footsteps paused. "In my life, there are no such words as regret." Sarah watched his retreating figure, and for some reason remembered the day they lost their child. For the first time, he knelt beside her and shed tears, repeating the words he had said countless times before. "Sorry, I'm sorry, but now he wanted to personally cripple her hands. Sarah casually wiped away the blood seeping from her palm and took the report handed to her by the secretary. She conducted a DNA test using the deceased child of Sylvia and the saliva of Larry. No blood relation. Now, the child in her womb most likely does not belong to Larry either. Sarah let out a low chuckle, feeling an inexplicable sense of sorrow and irony. Master, should we inform Mr. Larry about this matter? No need. Sarah used a lighter to set the report on fire. Larry was too suspicious. He wouldn't believe her words, only what he saw with his own eyes. She was actually looking forward to the day Larry would learn the truth. The time to set sail was scheduled for the evening. Sarah and Larry each brought their own people. He lifted the veil covering Sylvia's head, allowing everyone to confirm her identity. It's just that there were no Manfred family members behind him. Sarah let out a sigh. They had ultimately reached this point, in his heart. That child meant to consolidate his status was ultimately more important than her. As the head of the family, she should accompany Sylvia on board. As she brushed past Larry's shoulder, she took off the wedding ring she had worn on her left middle finger for 5 years and returned it to him. His Adam's apple bobbed. Seeing that he didn't take it, Sarah casually tossed it into the sea. As she entered the cabin, suddenly a large hand holding a white cloth tightly covered her mouth. Sylvia pushed her away and ran outside. Outside the door came Larry's sigh. Sarah. After Sylvia gives birth to the child, I will bring you back. The next second, Sarah passed out. By the time she woke up again, the ship had already sailed into international waters. The person who had ambushed her had already been dealt with. She walked onto the deck and watched as the secretary pushed the pre-prepared corpse, along with the lifeboat, into the sea. The head of the family. Everything is ready. Sarah looked down at the deep, dark sea. The churning waves instantly swallowed the corpse named Sarah. Send someone to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get things settled properly. The boat turned around and headed toward the new city. The sky was beginning to brighten. Sarah suddenly felt her entire body relax. Larry, this is the last time I help you. No divorce. Only widowhood. Sarah was sent to the island on the second day. Larry brought Sylvia and boldly barged into the Manfred family mansion without any attempt to hide it. Everyone saw Sylvia still standing there perfectly fine, and their expressions instantly turned grave. Starting today, the Manfred family will be taken over by me. Larry sat in the main seat with his legs crossed, his voice calm yet carrying an undeniable authority. Everyone instantly understood what had happened to Sarah. I'm giving you a chance now. Those who don't want to follow me can leave immediately. Larry's slender fingers rested on the edge of the leather sofa, tapping rhythmically. Logically speaking, since Sarah had an accident, Larry was the most qualified to take over the Manfred family. However, Larry's ambition was too obvious and too flamboyant. He would abandon his most loyal pawns for the sake of power, and one day quietly dispose of them. Sylvia is merely a decoy placed in plain sight. To move against her is to oppose Larry. The last one who tried, Sarah, has already been dealt with. He was forcing them to take a stance. What he wanted was the power to have the final say, the authority of absolute control. The director who had been with Sarah the longest stood up first, looking at Larry with righteous indignation. Larry, I never expected you to be such a heartless and ungrateful wretch. The Manfred family and the head of the family have treated you well. How could you harm her for an outsider? Even if I die, I will never work under you. Larry narrowed his eyes slightly and lit a cigarette. He didn't speak. The white smoke he exhaled shrouding his face, making his expression unreadable. The director swept past everyone and walked straight out the door. A red cross hair landed precisely on his temple. His body suddenly stiffened. The next second, the door slammed shut with a loud bang. There was only a single sound, and then silence fell outside. Larry straightened up, flicked the ash from his fingertips, and cast a cool, sweeping glance over the others below, who were as silent as cicadas in winter. And you? No one dared to answer. No one knew who was the first to kneel on the ground, then one after another, until everyone had bowed in submission. We are willing to follow Mr. Larry. Larry let out a light laugh. The rather unpleasant family gathering soon came to an end. Larry stayed behind to rest, something he hadn't done in a long time. Larry brother, I want you to stay with me tonight. Sylvia coquettishly pressed herself against Larry's back. Her fingers adorned with bright red nail polish tracing circles on his firm back muscles. Larry turned around and gave her a faint glance. The doctor said you need complete rest before giving birth, Sylvia pouted, her face showing some dissatisfaction. But the doctor said only occasionally, be obedient. Larry's voice was flat, but the unquestionable authority and chill in it made Sylvia shiver instantly. She swallowed hard and forced a smile. Then I'll go rest first, after Sylvia left. Larry turned and entered Sarah's room. Mr. Larry, this is the first time you've rejected Sylvia's advances. Bobby's assistant was a bit curious. I don't have the habit of making love with other women in my wife's bed. Larry reached out and touched the photo of the two of them on the bedside table. In the photo, Sarah was smiling like a flower. To avoid revealing his identity too early, their wedding that year was kept very simple. A soda can pull tab served as her Harry Winston. The ocean waves were her gown's train. 5 years had passed, and with this occasion, he had owed her far too much. How much longer at most? Larry stared intently at Sarah's smile in the photograph. The doctor said at most 6 months. Once the baby is born, it can be raised in an incubator. Have someone deliver supplies to the island. She doesn't like sweets, so keep the food light, don't add scallions or onions, and make sure the meat is well done. Larry knew Sarah's preferences like the back of his hand. If it weren't for the child in Sylvia's womb, they would never have reached this point. But he had no regrets. After all, he knew Sarah loved him too much. No matter what he did, she would unconditionally forgive him and unconditionally come back. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been entangled for so long. Assistant Bobby left. Larry sat in the darkness, a crimson glow flickering at his fingertips. He slightly furrowed his brow and exhaled a ring of white mist. Even though he had already taken over the Manfred family, Sylvia's unborn child was safe and sound, and Sarah no longer had any reason to leave him. Yet his heart still beat with unease. For people like them, living on the edge every day, they couldn't help but trust their sixth sense. But Larry had no idea where this feeling came from. He slowly closed his eyes and lay on the bed, completely enveloped by Sarah's unique scent. It was the fragrance of jasmine. It had been so long since they had made love that now, just smelling Sarah's scent, he couldn't help but feel aroused. Larry's Adam's apple bobbed up and down. His breathing grew somewhat hurried. His mind was filled with images of Sarah, her tears, her laughter, the way she panted and gasped beneath him in the throes of passion. Larry couldn't help but recall Sarah's slap. It hurt. After all, she hadn't held back. But what reached him before the pain was the fragrance from her. Larry had a rare good night's sleep. The next morning, just as he got up, a phone call came in. Is this Mr. Gu? There's a package for you here. But he didn't remember ordering anything. The courier glanced at the information on the package. Yes. It's the divorce certificate mailed from the Civil Affairs Bureau. Larry frowned slightly. He reached out and opened the drawer. The divorce agreement was still intact, pressed beneath the marriage certificate. This doesn't match Sarah's way of doing things. She's not that childish, using methods that only little girls would use to get his attention. Larry ultimately took the package. It was very light. Upon opening it, there was only a document and a dark red divorce certificate inside. He didn't open the document to check, but merely flipped through the divorce certificate. His name was written on it. Below it was the steel seal of the Civil Affairs Bureau. It's actually quite realistic. Larry called over Assistant Bobby and casually tossed the documents and divorce certificate to him. Deliver these things to Sarah. Tell her that playing these little tricks is useless. She can come back whenever she's ready to accept the child in Sylvia's womb. Larry looked somewhat distracted as he stood up, threw on a suit jacket, and walked straight out. Having taken over the Manfred family, it was only right for him to meet those old fossils on the board of directors. For Sarah's sake, he had to go through the motions. A row of bodyguards in black cleared the way ahead. Larry's eyes held no emotion. Perpetually half lazy and half imposing, radiating an icy aura around him. Just as he reached the entrance of the conference hall, he saw Sylvia arguing fiercely with the staff at the door. Her face flushed with anger. Why won't you let me in? Do you even know who I am? Second miss. The family head has given orders no outsiders are allowed inside during the meeting. The staff member's voice was indifferent, and he looked at Sylvia with a hint of disdain, his gaze lingering on her slightly swollen belly. Do you know that right now Larry is the head of the Manfred family? I am the future lady of the house. Maybe by then, the entire Manfred family will be mine too. When I become the CEO, I'll fire all of you snobbish people. The employee gave a polite smile but did not yield an inch. You damn bootlicker, what's so great about that, Sarah? She only became CEO because she was born into a good family. If it were me, I could definitely do better than her. Sylvia grumbled defiantly. Everyone behind Larry, including his assistant Bobby, couldn't help but laugh. A canary should know its place. Mr. Larry, assistant Bobby sighed with admiration. Genetics are truly remarkable. Fortunately, intelligence isn't hereditary. Everyone could see that Sylvia and Sarah were as different as night and day. One is a thorny rose that grew up in the wind and rain. The other is a dodder flower raised in a greenhouse. Sarah was able to secure her position as the head of the family under the watchful eyes of many, and her methods are certainly no less than Larry's. Any one of the old-timers inside, if singled out, could crush Sylvia with just a flick of their hand. Only she herself remains lost in her beautiful dream. Larry pursed his lips without speaking, making it impossible to tell whether he agreed or not. Hearing steady footsteps, Sylvia turned her head and saw Larry approaching, her eyes instantly lighting up. Larry, this employee actually won't let me in. I'm also a member of the Manfred family. What matters concerning the Manfred family could I possibly not be allowed to know? Larry glanced at her, but before he could speak, Assistant Bobby spoke first. Miss Sylvia, the meeting content is dull. You wouldn't be interested. You can wait in the lounge first. Mr. Larry will come to accompany you after the meeting. Seeing Larry arrive, the staff member bowed and opened the door for him. He walked in under everyone's gaze but outside the door, Sylvia's persistent calls continued unabated. Mr. Larry, shall I take care of it? Assistant Bobby lowered his voice. Let her in, Larry said in a faint tone. Assistant Bobby frowned slightly. But this meeting, don't worry, she can't understand. Assistant Bobby nodded. Had someone let Sylvia in, and respectfully added a seat for her. Sylvia walked in with her head held high, her barely noticeable belly protruding slightly. Everyone was now present. Larry even thoughtfully placed a nameplate for the director who had already been dealt with. He snapped his fingers. Assistant Bobby distributed a document to each director. It was a stock transfer agreement. Over the years, you've all worked hard to consolidate the Manfred family's position. Once I take office, there will naturally be no need for such toil. Larry looked at the board members exchanging bewildered glances below and was in no hurry to push for an immediate decision. After all, Sarah's shares would be transferred to him. He had long since grasped the real power of the Manfred family. He simply wanted absolute authority. A director sneered coldly, casually picked up the documents and flung them, causing papers to scatter and fall all around like snowflakes. Larry, you have some nerve. What qualifications do you have to take over the Manfred family? Even if you snatched all the shares from us, it would only amount to 30%. What do you know, you old fool? As long as Larry and Sarah aren't divorced, Larry naturally has the right to represent the Manfred family. Sylvia, in her agitation, slammed the table and stood up, pointing at the director's nose as she cursed. The head of the family had already cashed out the shares half a month ago, not to mention your marriage was dissolved long ago. The atmosphere in the room instantly dropped to freezing point. Larry narrowed his eyes slightly, a fierce and sinister look gradually emerging in their depths. Want a divorce? As long as I haven't agreed, she will never be able to escape from the palm of my hand. The director let out a cold laugh. Larry, it's not a divorce, it's widowhood. Larry's expression froze for a moment. That uneasy feeling grew stronger, silently creeping from his chest toward his throat. He subconsciously reached into his pocket and grasped the wedding ring that had been Sarah thrown away. It was retrieved from the sea by people he specifically sent to dive for it after Sarah left. The diamond's edges dug deeply into his palm. Larry, yet he seemed to feel no pain at all. Larry's expression gradually darkened. Pull out his tongue. the bodyguards behind him instantly moved into action, pressing the unresisting director down onto the table. "Larry, even if you pull out my tongue, it won't change the fact that I'm telling the truth. You're responsible for all of this, you beast. To seize the Manfred family's assets, you even went so far as to target Sarah." Larry raised his hand, stopping the bodyguard from kissing him. "Go investigate. If even a single word from your mouth turns out to be false, it'll be your head that rolls next." Assistant Bobby soon returned with the information. He just came back with a somewhat grim expression. "Mr. Larry, the person who delivers supplies to the island said that the lady never arrived on the island. On the other side of the island, they found a burnt-out boat and a charred body." Larry's heart suddenly skipped a beat. His face showed no expression, but his hands trembled slightly. "Lead the way." Larry instantly stood up, but Sylvia grabbed his wrist. "Larry, I'll go with you. I'm worried about your sister too." Larry looked at the delight in her eyes, expressionlessly pried her fingers open one by one. "Take her, Miss Sylvia, back." Then he left without looking back. Before verifying the truth of the matter, he wouldn't let Sylvia leave easily. The journey from the port to the island took nearly 10 hours. The rugged reef was covered in dark, jagged patterns, and the desolate moonlight shone upon the charred, blackened ship, while the churning waves resembled tears. Larry stood on the airship, his face hidden in the darkness, making it impossible to discern the emotions on his face. He simply stood at the bow, staring unblinkingly at the ship. His knuckles clenched so tightly they turned white. "Find it." Larry, his thin lips parted slightly, his voice as cool and pale as moonlight. "Find her alive or dead." They had done too many things that tread the gray areas, naturally knowing how to make a clean escape without leaving a trace, but at this moment, he would rather she had just used some clever trick. The salvage team instantly steered the boat toward the shore, a dark mass moving swiftly. The sound of the kayak cutting through the water was particularly piercing in the dead silence. Divers plunged into the water one after another, searching for a figure in the vast, boundless sea. A wave stirred up the biting sea breeze, and the endless ocean swept loneliness toward Larry. He looked up at the moon, watching it move silently, cigarette after cigarette burning out, like hopes being extinguished only to be reignited again, after what felt like an eternity. A diver surfaced and made a gesture. The body had been found. Larry's heart sank instantly. The body was brought ashore, and his boat was also heading towards the shore. Perhaps the sea breeze was unusually damp and cold. Larry, for the first time, felt his entire body trembling with a chill. His footsteps down the stairs were heavy. Step by step, the sound echoed heavily, as if walking upon his trembling heart. By the moonlight, he could clearly see the familiar outline lying on the ground. Charred all over, it was almost impossible to recognize a human form. Larry didn't want to admit that it was Sarah. In his mind, Sarah had always been beautiful and proud. "It's definitely not like this now." He wanted to raise his hand to touch it, but his arm felt as heavy as if filled with lead, his fingertips trembling in midair. "I don't know how long it took, Larry, before he found his hoarse voice again. Is that really her? Perhaps there's still a chance, after all. There were so many people on the ship, Mr. Larry, it's been confirmed. There are injuries on the webbing between the thumb and index finger, as well as on the palm of the left hand." Larry closed his eyes, and suddenly, his heart ached with a sharp pain. The scars he had personally left on Sarah had unexpectedly become the evidence of their reunion. Larry slowly, gently reached out and touched the face that could almost be described as terrifying. "Baby." That was Larry's first time making such a voice. It sounded as if it had been crushed, carrying a childlike helplessness. "I've come to take you with me. Does it hurt a lot? You always tell me you're not afraid of pain, enduring 2 cuts for me, yet you still say you don't feel a thing. There isn't a single patch of healthy skin left on my body now." The skin touched by the fingertips was frighteningly cold, as if it could freeze a person solid. Everyone lowered their heads. Unable to bear looking any longer, his eyes still held the same tenderness and affection as before, but now with a glimmer of tears at the corners. "Once I finish bandaging you, I'll take you home." Larry gripped Sarah's hand with an almost pathological intensity, just like before, dabbing alcohol on her skin, gently blowing on it, and then wrapping it with a bandage. I had someone find the ring you threw away in anger. It's been 5 years, and you've never taken it off. Even if you get angry in the future, please don't treat me like this again, okay?" He knelt on one knee, took the diamond ring from his pocket, and gently, as if in a wedding ceremony, slipped it onto her middle finger once more. Larry was murmuring something, like a lover's tender whisper, yet it sent chills down one's spine. "Baby, didn't you say you couldn't bear to see me cry? Why aren't you wiping away my tears? Don't you hate me? If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have ended up like this. You were such a beauty-conscious little girl, you must find it unbearable to see yourself like this now, right? I'm sorry, my dear, I'm so sorry." Larry's voice was so hoarse it was barely recognizable. For the second time, he shed tears in front of everyone. The first time was when we got married. Tears fell upon the diamond, refracting a brilliant, shimmering light. One ring, 5 years of time, joy and sorrow intertwined. Larry touched his own face and only then realized that he had long been in tears, but from beginning to end, only the endless sound of the wind answered him. Larry buried his head in the hollow of her shoulder, just as he had done before, like a helpless child seeking the warmth of a mother. Sarah. Sighs mingled with sobs that had been suppressed for too long, finally breaking through the throat. Larry had bloodshot eyes, the corners tinged with crimson. "I thought that once you took over the Manfred family, with no more resources to oppose me, you wouldn't leave me. Isn't it better to stay by my side forever?" He tightened his grip on Sarah's hand a little more forcefully. "Even in death, you are mine." Larry personally carried Sarah's body and walked step by step back to the capital. The entire body was charred beyond recognition, and the fingerprints on the hands were unidentifiable. Although some suspected Sarah couldn't have died just like that, Larry still insisted it was her. For a long time, Larry kept the body on the bed, locking himself in the room and refusing to see anyone. Everyone found it creepy and thought Larry had gone mad, but he was a complete madman through and through. As usual, he had someone deliver Sarah's favorite clothes and helped her put them on one by one. He had someone deliver Sarah's favorite dessert and kept it on the cabinet until it went moldy. He styled her according to his memory of how Sarah used to look, until Sylvia could no longer hold back and, disregarding Larry's orders, barged in directly, only to see Larry sitting by the bedside, as if caressing his gentle lover. He stroked Sarah's hand. The room was pitch black, the curtains tightly drawn, with only the dim yellow desk lamp providing a faint glimmer of light. Hearing the sound of the door opening, Larry lifted his head and cast a casual glance backward. Sylvia shivered instantly. She had no choice but to brace herself and speak. "Larry, Assistant Bobby has already selected an auspicious date for the burial. He wants the body to be transported now." Larry slowly stood up and walked step by step until he was right in front of her. A massive shadow loomed over Sylvia. Because there was no light, she looked up but couldn't make out the man's expression. Yet one could vaguely sense the coldness in his eyes. "Who gave you the authority to make decisions on your own?" Assistant Bobby is his man. Without his orders, he would not act on his own. There's only one possibility, that is Sylvia acted first and reported later. Framing this matter on Assistant Bobby, Larry narrowed his eyes slightly, a flash of displeasure passing through their depths. He hated it most when people used their self-righteous little tricks. I was just worried about you, Larry. You lock yourself in your room all day. And with this, you never come to see me and the child, leaving me in constant worry." Larry showed no reaction. "Even for our sister's sake, we should let her rest in peace." Larry's expression finally showed a hint of softening. "Get someone to handle this matter properly. I want to personally carry her coffin." Larry's voice was so hoarse it was barely recognizable. "This doesn't comply with the regulations, does it?" Sylvia frowned slightly. "In the Manfred family's household rules, only blood relatives could serve as pallbearers for the deceased. At the very least, it should be Sylvia who carries the coffin. In her heart, I am her only family." Larry's voice was firm and left no room for doubt, carrying a hint of madness. Sylvia didn't dare to say anything more. The door opened, and several people came in from outside, collected the body, and took it away. By the light from outside, Sylvia could finally see clearly. Larry's white shirt was filthy and disheveled. The hair that was always meticulously combed in daily life now hung down, covering half of his reddened eyes, like a demon that had crawled up from hell. Sylvia painfully wrapped her arms around his lean, strong waist. "Brother, look at how you've let yourself get like this. It's really heartbreaking. Tonight, I'll stay and keep you company, all right?" As he caught the strong scent of perfume on her, Larry frowned slightly, felt a wave of nausea in his stomach, and instinctively retched. "No need," he pushed her away abruptly. Perhaps he had long grown accustomed to Sarah's faint fragrance, making other women's scents seem particularly pungent in comparison. Sylvia's face instantly stiffened. She gritted her teeth and forced a smile. "All right then, you should get some rest early." Looking at Larry's somewhat gaunt cheeks, I couldn't resist reaching out to touch them, but just as my hand was halfway in the air, Larry couldn't hold back another dry heave. "Get out." He wearily rubbed his temples and spoke in a low voice. After Sylvia left, Larry immediately opened the window for ventilation. Sylvia sat in her room fuming, not even having an appetite for her favorite snow pear paste that the maid brought her. "Second, miss." The maid looked at her furious expression and asked with concern, "Mr. Larry is like this. What if when the child is born, he refuses to hold a wedding with you?" Sylvia would never allow her child to become an illegitimate child and be ridiculed for a lifetime. In the past, Sarah had always been forced to remain subordinate to others. Now that she had finally waited for her to die, as long as she married Larry, she would be able to live a life free from worries about food and clothing, and stand above everyone else. She absolutely could not stand by and watch everything she was about to gain just vanish into thin air. Sylvia, a flicker of resentment flashed in her eyes as she reached out and knocked the pear syrup to the ground. "Damn it, what's so great about that bitch? She's already dead and still won't let me go." Sylvia let out a sharp scream, her chest heaving uncontrollably. She didn't know how much time had passed before she finally calmed down. There are only two things that can tie a man down: his stomach and a child. If one child isn't enough, then have another one. "Miss, what if Mr. Larry refuses?" Sylvia sneered coldly. Did his zipper recognize its owner? "As long as Sarah dies, I'll have a chance. Given time, Larry will naturally come to appreciate my virtues. By then, she would be the new Mrs. Lambert." Sylvia, a flicker of malice passed through her eyes. "Sarah, you've calculated everything, but you still miscalculated one step. Back then, to force me to leave, you specifically chose an auspicious day for the voyage, but it ended up becoming your death anniversary. Now it's my turn to pick an auspicious day for your death anniversary." On the day of the funeral, a chilly drizzle began to fall. Everyone present was dressed in black and white attire, and at a glance, it seemed as if only these two colors remained in the field of vision. Everyone stood solemnly, bowing their heads in mourning. Larry wore a black suit, holding a black umbrella in his hand, his gaze fixed unwaveringly on the engraved tombstone. The white roses blooming around it deeply stung his eyes. He couldn't help but reach out to touch the raised letters on it. The rain ran down his wrist, icy cold to the bone. Larry, yet it felt as if it were scalding his fingertips. His gaze was somewhat dazed, his mind adrift in a vague sense of unreality, even feeling a touch of absurdity. It was only a few days ago that they had last met, and now that person lay in a cold, hard coffin. The voice of the master of ceremonies echoed in his ears. But Larry didn't take in a single word. It was as if he could no longer hear anything. All the strength in his body drained away in an instant. He still couldn't get used to Sarah's departure. Perhaps he would never get used to it in this lifetime. Sending her to the island was just to let her know not to lay hands on Sylvia and the child again. Larry knew her personality well. She would never bow her head, so he set the duration for half a year. Half a year had passed. Sylvia should have given birth by then, and no matter how much Sylvia objected, he would bring her back. He did bring her back. It just shouldn't have been in this form. Larry looked up and saw Sarah's final request engraved on her tombstone. "For God's sake, let me leave with dignity." In their favorite year, they always teased each other. "I wonder which will arrive first, my lover or death. They have committed too many evils. One could say they would stop at nothing for power, but the irony is, she didn't die by the enemy's blade, but by the hand of her lover." Larry suddenly remembered the night he took over the Lambert family completely. He and Sarah stood together on the company rooftop. As he knelt on one knee and personally slipped the wedding ring onto her finger, she raised her hand, watching the diamonds sparkle refract in the moonlight, and smiled. She asked him, "Larry, do you think anything in this world is truly eternal?" Larry planted a kiss on the back of her hand. "My love for you is eternal." The MC's voice sounded again, pulling Larry's thoughts back to the present. It was time to present the flowers. As the words fell, Larry felt a sudden pang in his heart, his thin lips parting slightly as he let out an almost imperceptible sigh. Sorry. Before the funeral procession, everyone was to offer flowers to Sarah. Everyone bowed their heads, placing their bouquets before the tombstone with heavy hearts. Only Sylvia was the exception. She gently touched her slightly protruding pregnant belly, holding a new Hermes bag in her right hand and sunflower seeds in her left. Ms. Sylvia, Assistant Bobby stood beside her, reminding her with dissatisfaction. Sylvia pouted and finally put down the sunflower seeds in her hand. Larry said it's fine as long as I'm holding something black and white, didn't he? I'm not flaunting it around. Assistant Bobby furrowed his brows even more tightly, his voice turning several degrees colder. If you continue like this, I'll have to report it to Mr. Larry. All right, I get it. Sylvia impatiently picked up the flower bouquet and walked step by step toward the grave. All eyes were on her. Although she tried hard to force a sorrowful expression, the slight upward curve of her lips betrayed the wild joy in her heart. Sister, please rest in peace. I'll take good care of everything you left behind, including your husband. Sylvia's acting was a bit exaggerated, making it hard to watch. Larry's face darkened. Take her away. But Sylvia is Ms. Sarah's only relative. For the funeral, she should be there. Larry cast a faint glance over. Assistant Bobby immediately lowered his head. Sorry, I overstepped. Assistant Bobby immediately took Sylvia away. The auspicious time for the funeral procession had arrived. The sound of gongs and drums instantly rang in the ears. Larry gently placed one hand on the white coffin. All around were distant relatives dressed in mourning attire. The rain had stopped, and the wind rose again. The soul-summoning prayer flags fluttered in the wind, and the funeral procession stretched out in a grand, flowing river of white. The person at the front began chanting scriptures. The ceremony lasted until evening. Larry was about to leave the cemetery when suddenly a little girl ran out from the crowd and grabbed hold of his pant leg. He lowered his head and realized the little girl looked somewhat familiar. After he returned to the Lambert household, Sarah would often go with him to the welfare home to take care of the children. First, because after all these years, aside from that child lost unexpectedly, they had no other children of their own. Second, because they had committed too many sins. And aside from temples, they always needed a place to atone for their wrongdoings. That place was the orphanage. This child Larry remembered. Sarah was very fond of her because she was born with damaged vocal cords and couldn't speak. For her, Sarah even specifically learned sign language. Watching the little girl anxiously gesturing about something, Larry frowned slightly. What did she say, Mr. Larry? She said she has something to give you, something Ms. Sarah left with her before she passed away, saying it must be handed to you personally. It will be a gift, beyond your expectations. Assistant Bobby stood by and thoughtfully translated. Larry took the weightless document, running through possibilities in his mind but unable to guess what Sarah could have for him. For some inexplicable reason, Larry felt uneasy, suddenly reluctant to open the file. After hesitating for a long time, he still took that step. Inside was a paternity test report. The test subjects were him and Sylvia's first child that was miscarried, and the bottom line showed, the parent-child relationship is not established. Larry's hand holding the report suddenly stiffened. He expressionlessly crumpled the report into a ball and casually tossed it to Assistant Bobby. Go to the testing hospital immediately and find the doctor who performed the test. Assistant Bobby only realized it was a paternity test report when he opened it. He slightly furrowed his brow. Mr. Larry, could it be that Ms. Sarah deliberately planned this? Larry got into the back seat of the Maybach without even turning his head. The sky had completely darkened, making it impossible to see the expression on his face. She wouldn't be that foolish. If Sarah weren't dead, he wouldn't believe this report at all. But now Sarah is dead. Sylvia, whether the child in her belly is born or not has nothing to do with her, because she couldn't see it either. The car soon stopped at the hospital entrance. Larry walked through the wind and rain into the hospital, where doctors and several black-suited bodyguards were already waiting in the ward. Mr. Larry, watching the man's aggressive approach, the doctor swallowed hard. Larry sat on the leather sofa, his narrow phoenix eyes devoid of any emotion. Speak. 1 month ago, Mr. Manfred had someone bring us a sample of your saliva, asking us to conduct a paternity test with a stillborn fetus. The results came out the same day. Based on the timeline, it was the day Sarah hosted a special family dinner for Sylvia. No wonder her behavior had seemed somewhat unusual. In other words, she already knew at that time Sylvia that the child in her belly wasn't his. Larry rubbed his throbbing temples, a shadow of gloom flickering in his eyes. What kind of people or situations hadn't he encountered in the capital? To think he had been played like a fool by a young girl. It would be laughable to even mention it. Sarah knew him too well. She knew that if she had presented the report at that time, he would never have believed it. Larry didn't dare to imagine what kind of look Sarah had in her eyes when she looked at him during that period. Is it pitiful or laughably ironic to have loved a man for so long? In the end, cleverness outsmarted itself. Larry couldn't help but let out a laugh. The corners of his lips lifted slightly. But his eyes were cold and merciless, as if instantly freezing one's heart, carrying an intense sense of oppression. Bring Sylvia here. Yes, Assistant Bobby complied. Sylvia was pulled out of her sleep and couldn't help but vent her anger at Assistant Bobby. What are you doing? Don't you know I was sleeping? Do you not want your head either? After spending some time with Larry, her temper has also grown. It's just that without any presence or strength, it's hard to make people fear her. A mess, Sylvia. It's just going to the hospital for a checkup. Assistant Bobby didn't want to put it so harshly and scare her. After all, Larry hasn't spoken yet, and no one knows what the outcome will be for the child in Sylvia's womb. Are you trying to kill me? Don't you know prenatal checkups are done during the day? I need to sleep at night. If something happens to the baby because I didn't get enough sleep, can you take responsibility for that? If you don't get out now, I'll have someone throw you out. Don't think that just because you're Larry's secretary, I'll give you any respect. When it comes down to it, you're no different from Sarah, just another dog by Larry's side. Bobby's face turned colder. Sylvia's words were not wrong, but even when hitting a dog, one must consider its master. What right did she have? Assistant Bobby reached out and clamped his hand around her wrist, pulling her along forcefully. Sorry, this is Mr. Larry's order. Sylvia was thrown into the car, looking at the burly bodyguards seated around her. Sylvia swallowed hard, feeling for some reason like a lamb thrown into a tiger's den. But then it occurred to her, weren't these all bodyguards here to protect her? Why should she be afraid? She quickly adjusted her mindset and resumed her usual arrogant demeanor. The car soon stopped at the hospital entrance. As soon as she entered the ward, everyone instantly turned to look at her. Larry, why did you make her come for a checkup so late at night? Sylvia spotted the handsome man at a glance, revealing a delicate, coquettish smile as she threw herself toward him. But before she could reach Larry, someone grabbed her and held her back. Do it. Larry lit a cigarette for himself, the white smoke he exhaled making Sylvia cough incessantly. Sylvia felt an inexplicable fear in her heart, as Larry's attitude toward her had visibly grown cold. At least in the past, he had considered the child and never smoked in front of her. Let go of me. What are you trying to do? Sylvia struggled continuously. But how could she possibly be a match for several strong and robust bodyguards? She could only watch helplessly as she was dragged into the operating room. Larry, what on earth is happening? What are they going to do? I'm so scared. Sylvia was forcibly tied to the operating table, her delicate face already streaked with tears. Looking at the face that somewhat resembled Sarah's, Larry felt annoyed for the first time. Because of the resemblance, Larry usually treated Sylvia with a bit more gentleness. Although he knew she had a spoiled temper, he rarely criticized her or made her cry. But if the child wasn't his, and because of Sylvia's situation, He ended up completely losing Sarah. Larry, his Adam's apple, bobbed. His eyes growing more venomous, the anesthesia gradually took effect. Sylvia soon fell unconscious. When she woke again, she only saw Larry standing by the bed. Just as she was about to speak pitifully, she saw Assistant Bobby walk in through the door holding a report. "Mr. Larry, the amniocentesis results are out. The paternity test came back negative." This time he had personally supervised the testing procedure, so there was absolutely no room for error. Larry's temples throbbed with bulging veins, his thin lips pressed into a tight line, and an unshakable fury simmered between his furrowed brows. Amniocentesis, the child. Sylvia kept murmuring these words, the color draining from her face inch by inch. She belatedly realized what Larry had done, her entire body instantly stiffening, goosebumps rising in horror. "No, it's not like that. Larry, please let me explain. There must be some misunderstanding. How could the child not be yours?" Larry let out a cold laugh and forcefully grabbed her chin. "How could the child not be mine? Sylvia, how long are you going to keep playing dumb? I could tolerate your previous foolishness, arrogance, and conceit, but I never imagined that even the only card you held was fake. Switching the real heir with a fake, I had no idea you were capable of such a clever trick." Larry looked down at her condescendingly, with no trace of the former tenderness and consideration in his eyes. Sylvia parted her lips slightly, about to explain, when she heard a sharp whistling sound before taking a solid slap across her face. This slap, Larry didn't hold back his strength. Sylvia's face instantly swelled up high, her whole head tilted to one side, with a trickle of blood seeping from the corner of her mouth. Her eyes filled with terror. The tears that had gathered in the corners of her eyes suddenly fell like broken strings. She covered her face, looking at the gloomy-faced man in disbelief. "Larry, I can explain this. I was forced. I didn't do it willingly. I didn't know that one time would, so I always thought it was your child." Sylvia's crying was starting to sound annoying. Larry waved his hand. "Gag her." Assistant Bobby immediately took a white cloth and stuffed it into her mouth. Sylvia widened her eyes, only able to let out fragmented whimpers. Larry didn't seem to be in a hurry to deal with her. After waiting for about 10 minutes, the ward door was pushed open with a bang. A bodyguard kicked a thin, weak man inside. The man trembled and crawled on his knees before Larry. "Mr. Larry." He lowered his head, not daring to meet Larry's deep, penetrating gaze. Before Larry could even speak, he blurted out everything he knew in one breath. "It was this woman who forced me. We were drinking together at the bar. She sat right next to me, and she even touched my thigh with a lustful look. I already said I didn't want to, but she hit me and said her lover is very powerful, threatening to kill me if I didn't comply." As soon as he finished speaking, the man kept kowtowing to apologize, repeatedly saying "I'm sorry" over and over. His forehead was bruised and bleeding, the blood trickling down his cheeks and pooling into a river on the ground. "Investigate." Larry spoke in a low voice. Assistant Bobby quickly brought the news. Everything the man said was true. Larry's eyes were purely black, filled with ferocity, and the way he looked at Sylvia was as if he were looking at a piece of rotten flesh. "Remove the child from her womb. No anesthesia is allowed. Use any means necessary. I want her to suffer to the fullest extent." Sylvia frantically shook her head, her mouth once again emitting violent sobs. The doctor stood nearby, hesitantly speaking up. "Mr. Larry, in this situation it could result in both mother and child being lost. When the time comes, should we prioritize saving the mother or the baby?" Everyone knew the baby hadn't reached full term, and even if placed in an incubator, it wouldn't survive. So the only life that could be saved was Sylvia's. The doctor didn't want to have an unnecessary death on their hands. Larry's gaze was icy cold. "I want both of them dead, but letting Sylvia die like this is still too easy on her. The suffering she endured isn't even 1/10,000th of what Sarah went through." He wanted to make her repent for what she had done. As she was dragged into the operating room, Sylvia struggled the entire time. Her hair was disheveled and draped over her face. Her complexion gradually reddened because her mouth was blocked, and she had even kicked off one of her shoes. Before entering the operating room, Sylvia had the towel in her mouth fall out. She was screaming like a madwoman. "Larry, You can't do this to me. How can you be so cruel? Didn't you say you loved me? Say something. What is it I can't compare to? Why can't you let go of a dead person? I love you. I truly love you. Sylvia, her desolate voice echoed through the empty corridor. It wasn't until the operating room door was completely closed that her screams were finally cut off. Larry watched the red light above the operating room with an expressionless face. Assistant Bobby glanced at Larry's expression and couldn't help but sigh. How foolish. A woman who actually believes in the words "I love you." He didn't even need to read her fortune to know she was destined for 3 divorces in this lifetime. Sarah had been with Larry for so many years, yet Larry was willing to abandon her for the sake of power. Why would he care about a useless canary and a child who wasn't even his own flesh and blood? Love is something only the most exceptional people can afford to give. True devotion is only born in families of great wealth and status. What she wanted was never something Larry could give. Sylvia, no matter how much Larry tried to explain, he wouldn't listen. He only cared about the solid evidence he held in his hands. Because people's words can lie, they are always the most unreliable. After you take her out, lock her in the basement, cut out her tongue, cripple her limbs, and throw her into the red light district. Cutting out her tongue is to prevent her from biting it off to commit suicide, and crippling her limbs is to prevent her from escaping. Larry wants her to live in humiliation for the rest of her life. After giving the instructions, Larry turned and left the hospital. Just as I reached the door, a gust of autumn wind rose. Larry also seemed a bit dazed. Instinctively reaching out to stroke the wedding ring on his left hand, another late autumn has arrived. Sarah, why has the love from the past turned into what it is today? Perhaps all things have their season, and love has reached its late autumn. Larry wrote Sylvia's ending on a piece of paper and burned it before Sarah's grave. Sarah, perhaps I should have listened to you from the start. Larry looked at the black and white photo on the tombstone and forced a bitter smile. They had lived such exhausting lives that when they died, not even a single smiling photo could be found for their memorial portrait. Larry cast one last deep glance at the tombstone before turning to leave. Instead of heading straight home, he went to the Sarah orphanage she used to frequent during her lifetime. There was a group of adorable children waiting for him inside. Brother, as soon as he got out of the car, a group of children ran over and hugged him. Actually, Larry didn't like children. He hated noise, hated crying, and hated that the child had taken away Sarah's love. But now, he had fallen so low that he could only seek from a group of unrelated children the feeling that Sarah had once given him. He finally understood what it meant to love the house along with the crow on its roof. Larry had his assistant Bobby distribute candy to the children, while he himself stepped into the shabby little house. This place is filled with memories of him and Sarah, in the innermost small room. Sarah once held the child while painting there, and the large banyan tree planted in the courtyard. Sarah once swung on a swing here. Everywhere he looked, before he could even begin to think, memories surged up faster than reason. Larry's heart began to ache again. What truly killed him wasn't the moment he learned of Sarah's death, but a certain moment of calm when fragmented memories of her suddenly surfaced in his mind. That was the real lingering death. Larry suddenly felt someone tugging at his pants. He looked down and saw it was the little girl he had met at the funeral last time. She took out a drawing and placed it in his hand, gesturing something with her hands, some simple words Larry could vaguely understand. This was drawn by Sister Shin and me before. She said she doesn't have any children and would adopt me in the future. On the screen was a picture of the 3 of them. Larry's expression softened a little. He reached out and picked the child up in his arms. What's your name? Although the little girl couldn't speak, she could still understand. Vivian. My name is Vivian. Gratitude and hope. It's a good name. Larry carefully examined Vivian's features and suddenly felt she resembled Sarah a little. His heart stirred slightly. Would you like to come home with me? Larry suddenly wanted to adopt Vivian. After coming home with me, your name will be Vivian Lambert. She has her own surname now. It proves that she is no longer a child without a family. Vivian's eyes lit up, and she quickly nodded. She jumped down from Larry's arms, grabbed his large hand, and ran toward the director's office, excitedly explaining to her that Larry wanted to adopt her. It should be a good thing. but the dean was somewhat conflicted and hesitant. She let out a sigh. "Sorry, Mr. Lambert, we cannot agree to your request." "Why?" Larry was somewhat surprised. "It's rare for an orphanage to encounter a family with such favorable conditions, because a week ago, an Irish couple applied to our orphanage to adopt Vivian, and it has already been approved. Soon, Vivian will be sent to Ireland." The director placed the adoption documents on the table and pushed them forward. Larry saw the name on the adoption papers, Zachary, the one whom God remembers. His gaze lowered, and upon seeing the adoptive parent's English name, his hands trembled slightly. Sarah. In a church on the outskirts of Dublin, the melodious bell tolls carried far and wide with the wind. A woman in a grey coat slowly walked in and took a seat in the second row. The children from the choir arrived very early today. Sarah listened quietly, not joining in the prayers with her lips. It wasn't Sunday, so non-believers were also allowed to enter the church. She is not a devout believer, but occasionally purifying the soul is not a bad thing. Especially since she carries too many sins on her hands. "You came very early today." A gentle and refined man sat down beside her. Sarah glanced at her watch. It was exactly 9 o'clock in the morning. "You're late." The man raised an eyebrow and smiled. "I wonder if Ms. Sarah would do me the honor of giving me a chance to make amends." Sarah didn't say anything, simply stood up and walked out. Matthew knew this meant she had agreed. Parked outside was a low-key Lamborghini. Sarah stood by the passenger door, reaching out to touch the car body. "You've changed cars again." Matthew embraced her from behind, lowering his head to kiss her cheek. "Do you like it?" "Not bad. I've seen the most beautiful Italian girl." Sarah hooked her arms around his neck and planted a kiss on his thin lips. Matthew narrowed his eyes slightly, his left hand gently pressing against the back of her head as he deepened the kiss. His technique was quite good. After the kiss ended, Sarah's face was slightly flushed. She pushed against Matthew's firm chest and got into the passenger seat by herself. The car drove for 2 hours before finally stopping in front of a manor in the city center. The butler opened the door for them. Sarah and Matthew had just stepped inside when a lively little girl suddenly ran out and hugged them tightly. "Mom and Dad." Sarah picked up Noel and gave her a doting kiss on the cheek. "Madam, we've received news from the Domestic Welfare Institution." The butler stood behind her and spoke respectfully. Sarah nodded and put down Noel. "Be good. Go play by yourself for a while." Noel blinked his eyes, looking up at Sarah with an expectant expression. "Is my little sister coming? I even prepared a gift for my little sister. When will she arrive in Dublin?" Sarah rubbed her little head. "As soon as she arrives. Mom will take you to pick her up at the airport." "Okay. Then Mom has to pinky swear with me. No lying." Noel hooked his pinky with Sarah's finger, and only then left satisfied. Matthew wrapped his arms around Sarah from behind, burying his head in the crook of her neck. "I was worried that Noel might resist the idea of adoption, but it seems my worries were unnecessary." Noel is the orphan child of Matthew's relative. When she first arrived in Dublin, Sarah would often go to the church in the suburbs to listen to the choir's prayers. It so happened that the church was funded by the Oswin family. Matthew would always see a woman in a grey trench coat sitting in the second row, not saying a word or following the prayers. Over time, he became curious about her and took the initiative to ask for her contact information. The handsome man and the beautiful woman quickly developed mutual affection. The Oswin family was different from the Manfred family. For 3 generations, the Oswins had been in politics. With a completely clean background, Sarah didn't want to hide anything from him, so she revealed her entire past. As for whether Matthew would still want to be with her, that would be his own decision, but to her surprise, Matthew showed no disgust or shock, instead feeling heartache. A month later, something happened to a distant branch of the Oswin family, leaving only Noel as the orphan. According to Irish law, if Matthew wanted to adopt Noel, they had to live together as a married couple to be eligible for adoption. To some extent, Noel also helped Matthew out. After landing in Dublin, Sarah often thought of Vivian from the orphanage, who bore some resemblance to her. Coincidentally, wanting to find a companion for Noel, Sarah decided to adopt Vivian. There was only 1 week left until the child would arrive at the airport in Ireland. Sarah leaned in Matthew's embrace and casually placed the receipt sent from the domestic side on the table. That's what they say, but I always feel something isn't quite right. But she couldn't put her finger on it. It must be because I've been too tired lately, making me overthink things. Matthew affectionately ruffled her hair. Go upstairs and rest first. I'll call you down when the meal is ready. Sarah nodded, rubbed her temples, and then returned to her room. Watching her figure gradually disappear from view, Matthew's gentle expression slowly faded. He glanced at the Rolex on his wrist, picked up his suit jacket and the document on the table, and headed out. He got into the car and drove to the office. Go investigate. Matthew sat in his office chair, legs crossed, body slightly tilted, one hand resting on his knee, his eyes revealing a chilling coldness. Who exactly is that man who specifically applied to accompany his child to Dublin? Matthew already had the answer in his heart, but he didn't want to think about the worst-case scenario. After all, he wasn't in the habit of meeting his wife's ex-husband, but if the other party insisted on competing with him for someone, he wouldn't mind playing along. He had already made it very clear in the documents that an Irish couple wanted to adopt the child. He's not foolish enough to misunderstand these few words. The secretary returned quickly, though his expression was somewhat grave. Mr. Matthew, we have very little information about the other party. They must have used some method to conceal it. We only know the most basic details. Matthew took the document. Name, Larry, was married to Sarah for 5 years. He lived in the Manfred family since childhood and wasn't found by the Lambert family until he was 20. Through ruthless methods, he successfully secured his position as the head of the Lambert family. Other than that, there was no further information. Matthew let out a cold laugh. He knew this was Larry's provocation. While he was investigating the other party was also investigating him. They were both businessmen, so they naturally knew what to reveal and what to conceal to increase their chances of winning. In the end, all they could find out was merely what the other party wanted them to know. There was another photo. It was taken when Larry and Sarah had just gotten married and went on their honeymoon. Larry held Sarah's hand, revealing the sparkling pair of rings on his left middle finger. Matthew sneered coldly. Childish. Then he flipped the photo over and placed it face down on the table. Where is the person now? They are already on their way to Dublin with the child. Larry probably couldn't sit still and moved up his trip to Ireland. He was clever to specifically choose to come with the child. Even if Matthew wants to take action against him, he should consider the weight the child holds in Sarah's heart. Do you need us to intercept them? Matthew remained silent for a moment. No need, let him come, and we'll hold a welcome party for the child. Matthew stood up abruptly and straightened his tie. It was the one she had specifically chosen for him before he left home this morning. Since he wants to come, let him come. I'd like to see what tricks he has up his sleeve. Don't forget, this is his Matthew turf. Larry coming, Matthew eventually told Sarah. At the time, she was packing clothes for Vivian, and upon hearing the news, she just responded faintly, not even lifting her head. Regarding this matter, Sarah wasn't surprised. She knew Larry wouldn't let go of any chance to find her. She was just a little surprised that their reunion would come so soon. Should I stop him? Matthew took Sarah's hand, stroking the pigeon egg-sized ring on her left hand. It was their first day together. Matthew had personally put it on for her. It just happened to cover the deep mark left by the previous ring. Matthew felt quite satisfied. No need. Sarah put all the clothes into the suitcase and looked up at Matthew. My past with him is already over. What matters more is having you by my side now. Matthew raised his eyebrows slightly and let out a light hum, clearly in a good mood. That bastard treated you like that before. Do you need me to help you vent your anger, for example, break one of his arms, or snap one of his legs? Sarah raised her hand and gently patted his face. I don't have the habit of making enemies everywhere. Moreover, he has already received the punishment he deserves. Sarah's voice carried a hint of deeper meaning. Matthew frowned slightly. Losing a canary he never loved, and a child that was never his. What kind of punishment is that? Sarah smiled without saying a word. What truly leaves a lasting impression is making someone lose what they care about most. Matthew would soon find out what that was. Sarah stood up and selected an elegant dress from the wardrobe. I'll go with you to pick him up at the airport tomorrow. I can handle it on my own. No, you don't understand, Larry. The whole reason he came to Dublin was to see me. If I don't show up, he might target Vivian. They knew every inch of each other, the most ruthless parts and the most tender places. Matthew slightly raised his chin, his tone somewhat displeased. You're going to see him dressed like that? You've never worn anything this beautiful in front of me. Matthew pinched Matthew's waist. You've already seen me at my most beautiful. Then she emerged from the man's embrace, took a book from the drawer, tossed it into his hands, and walked out of the room without looking back. Matthew looked down at the book's cover. It was a philosophy book, with a sentence on the title page. The most beautiful moment of humanity is arriving in this world with a naked body, untouched by pollution. On the day of the airport pickup, the snow that had been falling continuously in Dublin for a week finally stopped. The weather had turned surprisingly clear. Sarah stood on the lawn, quietly watching the private jet slowly come to a stop. It's quite ostentatious, probably meant to slap Matthew in the face. The aircraft door slowly opened, and a little girl in a down jacket, her face beaming with a happy smile, eagerly ran out. Vivian, watch your step. A familiar, deep male voice sounded. Sarah looked up and met Larry's gaze. Both of them smiled. One smile was emotionless, the other filled with affection, like two blades testing each other's sharpness. Sarah, long time no see. Larry walked up to her step by step, still exuding the same commanding presence as in the past. He had just lost a lot of weight, although his hair was slicked back impeccably. And his suit and leather shoes were brand new, but his bloodshot eyes and the dark circles beneath them still proved that he hadn't been doing well during her disappearance. Matthew had his secretary behind him take Vivian's hand, while he himself walked up to Sarah and subtly positioned himself in front of her, shielding her. He forced a polite smile at Larry and extended his hand. Thank you, Mr. Larry, for taking the trouble to escort the child all the way to Dublin. As the child's father, I express my deepest gratitude to you. Larry cast a faint glance at Matthew without responding. The atmosphere in the room instantly froze to an icy point. Mr. Oswin looks younger than in the documents, perhaps not yet ready to be a good father. In terms of experience, I should be more suitable than Mr. Oswin. Their voices were calm, but their words were filled with gunpowder. Only after Matthew's hand hung stiffly in the air for a long moment did Larry finally return the handshake. They both saw disgust and hatred in each other's eyes. Pretentious lackeys, rude barbarian. Larry lowered his gaze, letting it fall upon the ring on Matthew's hand. My beloved specifically chose this one. The style isn't bad, is it, Mr. Larry? The one you're wearing is already an outdated classic. Young people nowadays prefer the new models, more fashionable and more presentable. Matthew curled the corners of his mouth into a provocative smile. Larry, his face darkened a few shades. If it weren't for the child still being here, he might have directly twisted Matthew's head off. Matthew, the banquet is about to begin. We should get going. Sarah linked arms with Matthew. Mr. Larry is busy with official matters, so we won't host a banquet. Farewell. With that, she turned to leave, never once looking at him from start to finish. Larry watched her receding figure, pursed his lips, and then slowly spoke. Baby, are you really that unwilling to see me? It's over between us. Ever since you chose Sylvia back then, Larry sighed. Snipers are positioned 150 meters away. Take one more step and you'll be within their range. Sarah continued walking as if she hadn't heard. They're aiming at Matthew. Sarah stopped in her tracks. She turned and looked expressionlessly at Larry, suddenly feeling very weary at heart. What exactly do you want? You. Larry stared straight at her, his eyes filled with madness and love. I just want you to come back to me. Let's be like we were before. Okay. Sarah let out a cold laugh. But I can't have children. I can't give you what you want. Even so, are you still willing? Larry pursed his lips tightly. The words seemed to be stuck in my throat, and I couldn't say anything. You hesitated. Sarah stared fixedly into his eyes. Since power is the most important thing in your heart, why did you come looking for me? Nothing can be obtained at the same time. Larry, you should understand this better than I do. Larry let out a sigh. We'll talk about this later. Child, there will always be time. Sarah clenched her fists. letting her nails dig into her palms, sending waves of piercing pain through her. Do you want me to stand by and watch you make love to another woman, let another woman bear your child, and then have the child call me mother? Larry, don't you think it's ridiculous yourself? For 25 years, all my kindness to you, my unconditional devotion, in your heart, were merely stepping stones to the pinnacle of power. Have you ever had a shred of sincerity for me? They saw disappointment in each other's eyes. Larry hated that she didn't understand him. Sarah hated his cold and indifferent nature. Perhaps there had been genuine feelings between them in the past, but now they had all faded away. Rather than living in constant suspicion, it was better to let go and set each other free. I'm really tired. Sarah's voice sounded weary. Let me go, Larry. Larry S. Adams' apple bobbed. Sarah had only begged him twice. The first time was for the divorce. The second time is now. I told you, I won't let go, even if it's just your corpse. I'll take you back. Sylvia has already paid the price for her arrogance. So why won't you forgive me? Sarah, I'm still young. You have to allow me to make mistakes. Sarah suddenly laughed. But as she laughed, tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. And what about you? What price have you paid? Forgiving you isn't something that only needs to be done once every time I remember. I have to forgive you all over again. What happened between us isn't just about a Sylvia coming between us. Even if she were gone, there would be thousands of Sylvia's. Why can't you just admit that you never really loved me that much in the first place? It's all just your possessiveness at play. You just can't accept that someone you've had for over 20 years suddenly doesn't belong to you anymore. If you insist on going after Matthew today, then you'll have to bring my corpse back with you. I wouldn't mind you holding another funeral for me. Larry felt so powerless for the first time. He remained silent for a long time before finally finding his hoarse voice. What exactly does he have that I don't? In the end, only a feeble sense of resentment remained. Larry, I want to have a complete family. Larry narrowed his eyes slightly. Sarah let out a sigh. Don't you understand yet? You're infertile. The child I lost when I took that knife for you was the only child you'll ever have of your own. She noticed it during the first checkup. A healthy body wouldn't have trouble conceiving for so long, unless Larry had a physical issue. Sylvia's 2 children not being his clearly showed the problem. But out of consideration for his pride as a man, she never brought it up. This is why she had always been so insistent on adopting a child within the marriage. Larry hated her for not being able to bear a child to secure her position in the Lambert family, but didn't she resent him just as much for failing to give her a complete family? Liking someone doesn't necessarily mean you're compatible. They were destined not to last. Larry he looked at her serious expression for a long time, perhaps realizing it himself, and suddenly smiled, lowering his eyes with tears hanging on his lashes. For the first time in front of everyone, he revealed his most vulnerable and helpless side. It made Sarah momentarily dazed, as if she had seen that 7-year-old boy again, sitting in a dirty alley, reaching out to tug at the hem of her clothes. But that one glance back caused 2 worlds that should never have overlapped to intersect. Perhaps everything started going wrong from that moment. I will withdraw my people, but I have one condition. Stay by my side for 7 days. If after 7 days you still can't forgive me, I'll let you go, okay? Sarah agreed immediately. Pull your people back. Larry snapped his fingers cheerfully. Sarah, Matthew frowned and let out a low growl. Don't go with this bastard. My people can handle him. Matthew, Sarah turned around and gave him a smile. This is between him and me. Let me handle it myself. Okay. Matthew instantly stiffened. Sarah took 2 bottles of pills from her bag, opened one and swallowed them directly, then threw the other bottle into Matthew's hand. The antidote is in Matthew's hands. If you don't let me go in 7 days, bring my corpse back with you. After saying this, Sarah brushed past his shoulder and boarded the private jet. The plane crossed the ocean and landed on a small island. Sarah stepped out of the cabin, looked at the familiar scenery, and let out a cold laugh. Does living here ease your guilt? No. Larry hugged her from behind. Sarah frowned and tried to break free, but found the man's strength too overwhelming. So she simply stopped struggling. He greedily inhaled Sarah's familiar scent. Just holding her like this dispelled the weariness of the past few months. I built a house on the very island where the accident happened. I've been living here all this time. Day after day, I think of you, feeling as if my heart is being torn apart. That is the only way I can atone to you, madman." Sarah couldn't help but curse under her breath. Larry smiled and affectionately nuzzled her cheek, making Sarah instantly feel creeped out. "In a world without you, I wouldn't mind going even crazier. Start over with me here, okay? I still have many more 20 years to spend with you, even if it takes a lifetime, I'm willing." Sarah didn't want to believe his words. "If you really thought that way, then I would have been the one chosen back then." She broke free from his grasp, walked into the room without looking back, and slammed the door shut. Larry looked down at his empty arms, his eyes dimming slightly. Right up until mealtime, Larry pushed the door open and walked in, carrying the meal he had just prepared. He saw Sarah sitting on the bed, flipping through their wedding album. "You're still the same as you were back then, unchanged." Larry placed the plate on the table, picked up a bowl of soup, and brought it to her lips. Sarah gave him a faint glance and did not drink. She casually pulled out all the photos that had captured her image, lit a lighter, and burned them. The flames danced wildly in the darkness, instantly devouring the photos into ashes. But Larry didn't seem to be angry. Instead, he took a sip himself first, then scooped another spoonful and fed it to her lips. "You don't like it? We can reshoot. I've been wanting to give you a proper wedding anyway. You're mine. I want everyone to remember you." Sarah pushed his hand away, picked up another bowl of rice, and started eating by herself. "Thanks to you, that unforgettable funeral was more than enough to make everyone remember." The entire meal passed with the two of them sitting in silence. Over the next 7 days, Larry took her to relive all the things they had done during their honeymoon: paragliding, skydiving, diving. He whispered sweet nothings to her for 7 days, cooked for her for 7 days, and also cried for 7 days. It's just that his tears could no longer move Sarah. The once foolproof tactic had now lost its effect. On the evening of the 7th day, Larry pushed open her door once again. In his hand, he now held an ornate dagger and a stack of documents. "Sarah, this is what I owe you. As long as you sign your name, the Lambert family will be yours." He owed her for all these years of dedication, owed her for that scar on the palm of her left hand. Larry for the first time knelt before her, his forehead pressed to the ground, pushing the documents and a dagger toward her, a standard posture of submission. Sarah let out a cold laugh, her black high heels with red soles stepping firmly onto his wrist. "You think I wouldn't dare? This is what you deserve, and his just deserts." Sarah lifted her foot and pushed forward with her high heel, kicking the document back. Then she stepped on the hilt of the dagger with the tip of her shoe, and with a flick of her foot, sent the dagger flying up into the air. The spinning dagger was Sarah steadily caught. She pressed down forcefully, and the sharp blade tip directly pierced into Larry's left palm, exactly matching her wound. Larry grunted, his back stiffened, but he endured it without making a sound. The bell tolled at midnight. Sarah threw on her black coat and swept past him in her high heels as she walked out the door. "Larry, we're over." The smell of blood spread through the room. Larry ignored the gushing blood from his palm, staggered to his feet, and reached out to grab her. "Larry, if you want to watch me die here, go ahead and stop me." His hand froze mid-air, then dropped powerlessly. Several helicopters circled above the island. Larry watched helplessly as Matthew took Sarah away. He forced a bitter smile toward her retreating figure. "Sarah, I'm serious about the Lambert family matter. Sorry, their lives in this lifetime were too tragic. Even when telling the truth, they couldn't make people believe them." Sarah turned her head, took one last deep look at him, and then left directly. The sky began to rain again. Larry had been staring at that helicopter. "The azure sea in my vision has faded to gray, because of the sea, because of the distance, because of my gradually weary gaze." "I'm sorry, Sarah," Larry said again. Only the wind heard it. He slowly walked towards the deep sea. 3 days later, Sarah received a letter from back home, which was Larry's final letter written before his death. His funeral had been quietly held. The Lambert family, in accordance with Larry's dying wish, fell into her hands. Sarah opened the letter, read it through completely, and then expressionlessly burned it. "Larry, we kept our promise." Separation is also a form of eternity, the end.